So we want to create a function where we could select a specific number in an array. So let's first make the function. So what exactly are we returning in this function? Well, we want to return an integer value. Those were the restrictions we were given for the lab. We'll put some random name for this. I'll just put name. Then let's set our parameters. What's going to be inside this function? Inside this function, we're going to include the array from the main. So we're just going to put, and what's going to be inside the array? There's going to be integers inside. So int, whatever name you want to give it, I'll put array. And then we put the brackets. The reason we put the brackets, if there was no brackets, then this would just be a variable that contains an integer value. So the brackets actually separates that from just a regular variable that contains an integer. So that's just the way I like to memorize that. Then you need something to put a limit. So we're gonna use a for loop. So we need a limit here on the size of the array. So I'm just gonna put a variable. Put a variable. That's gonna be an integer value, and I'm gonna call it size. So that's the size of our array. Then we want something that could select, like the select, because we're gonna do selection, right? So we need a number that we need to select, a variable that contains the number that we want to select from the array. So I'm just gonna call it key. Again, it's gonna be an integer, and it's gonna be named key. So now we got all that out of the way. Let's make this. So now, in order to select, we must go through each position inside the array. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do it with the for loop. And how are we going to go to each specific location inside the array? Remember, if we make an array, and then we want this array to have 5 slots. How are we going to do that? Well, we just set this array and we do this. This is going to create 5 slots. So what we want to do is make this array, and since we want to go from 0 to 4, we want to make this array and put the variable inside that gets added by 1 every single time we go inside. So that's the answer. We just need to put an I variable. So we put I is equal to 0 because we start at slot 0. Then we want to know when we stop. And this is where size plays the role. If your array only has 5 slots, then you should stop at 4 because we go to 0 through 4, which is 5 slots. So what we're going to do is when I is less than size, we can continue doing this. Which makes sense because you can't go past the limit of the size of the array. So let me close that. Then this will just add one more so we could actually move each slot. So now what's going to happen here inside this, every single time this is true, what's going to happen inside these 2 brackets? inside these two brackets. Well, here's the fun part. We want to check if a specific slot's number is equal to the key that we're searching for. The key being whatever number the user wants to find inside this array. So since we start at 0 and we want to go all the way to 4, we should make an if statement. If array in bracket I is equal to the key value that the person entered, then the following will be returned. Return I. And why return I? Because this gives us options. Yeah. I'll explain it right now, but let me go and finish this first. So we return I. So let's say our array is 5 slots, like I said. The size is 5 slots. So we start 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All this is 5 things inside the array. And we're going to input in slot 0, 1, and in slot 1, 2, in slot 3, slot 2, 3, in slot 3, 4, in slot 4, 5. And let's say the key is 4. We put the key is 4. This is going to cycle. It's going to go through. If array 0 is equal to key, then we return I. Is this the case here? No. So then we keep looping. We keep going. Then this gets incremented. This is going to be 1 now. So then therefore this is going to be 1. We check slot 1. No. Go increment it again. 2. 2. Is this it? No. Then we go again. It's going to go 3. 3. Is this right? Slot 3. Yes, 4 is there. So yes, we go here. So this is true. So now Ray is equal to key. And then we return I. And I don't know if you guys recall what Professor Slot mentioned, that we can't have an else statement with the return. The else statement has to be, well, not an else statement. It has to be a return statement. Has to be outside of the for loop. Because if you have a return statement and then once your first option is wrong, think about it. If your first option is wrong, then you automatically just output whatever this wrong option is. Not whatever this wrong option is. You're gonna just output that it's not in the array when it was actually inside the array. It was at slot 3. It was in slot 3, but since your first thing was wrong, it just stops the whole thing, the whole process, the whole loop, when you just finished the job. When in reality the answer was there, but you just had to go through more times. So a way to prevent this is by having the return statement outside of the loop, the for loop. So once we check every single slot, we have the ability to leave if nothing is returned. But what are we going to return if, let's say 4 wasn't in here? Let's say instead of 4 being on slot 3, it was what? Let's put 12. There is no 4 in either of these slots. These are not 4. So in this case, what we're going to do is in this return statement, when we exit out the loop and none of the options were right, we're going to return -1. And you'll see in a bit why. Let's close that real fast. This is I. Close that right there. So now let's go. Now, what I did here was just a function. Now let's say I want to call it inside the main. So I would have to put name. What are my parameters? In the main, let's say my array is called, let's put it as array underscore main. And actually, let me do it right. So now this is an integer, and it's gonna be called array underscore main. And notice how I didn't put this, the brackets. It's because inside our main we already declared it. Just imagine we already declared our array and stuff. So it's automatically gonna know anything with this name is gonna be an array. So there's no need for us. Actually, there's no need to put it either. My bad. Then we're gonna insert the size. In this case, in the main, I'm just gonna use the same variable. But keep in mind, this did not just transfer from the function. It's because I named inside my main that the size is gonna be equal to our limit, right? But it's not coming from the function. It's separate. I just named it the same thing. So now our third one is gonna be what? We're gonna call it key again. Again, it's not from the function. It's just a new thing that I created in the main. It's a new variable that I created. All right, then this will go in. So since we're returning something inside this function, you see this? We need something to hold that value that it returns out. So we're gonna set this equal to, let's say, the variable a. A is gonna carry whatever response we get from this function. And let's say, like in this example where 4 is not anywhere to be seen, we're gonna get return -1 because in none of the slots we had 4. So automatically, after we check all the slots like this function should do, we're gonna return -1 because there's no 4 in our array. So -1 will be inside this A. Now finally, we're just gonna need an if statement to separate the two pathways we could get. So we make an if statement. If A is equal to the value that the user inputted, which in this case is going to be key in the main function. They inputted key. Remember that. They inputted key, which is going to be, what they inputted was 4. And if it's going to be equal to A, then we go this route. We see out, let's say, see out the key, then we put this to give some space, then we put that this number right here is in the array. Then we end it. But let's say for the alternative, if it was -1, wait, sorry, my bad. It's not supposed to be A. We're supposed to put our array with a bracket and A inside of this. And why? Let me just think for a while because I barely reviewed this a little bit. This is me reviewing it actually. So we put A, get -1. Okay, got it. So let's say for a second that in fact it was in the array. We didn't get -1. Forget about this. That we got I. So let's say where I changed it, where remember when this was 4, I changed it to 12. Let's say it's 4. So it's correct. We return I. And then it stops at which slot? It stops at 3 slot. So then it's going to return 3. So now when we do this right here, A right here is equal to 3. So then this will confirm that in the array, slot 3, 4, and this 4 from the key that was entered by the user is equal. So in fact, we can see out this message. But the alternative is the one that I was trying to show earlier, right here. If it was -1, so let me erase so I'm not confused. Oh, let me so I'm not confused. Okay, if it was -1, all right, if it was -1, there is no such thing as a negative slot in an array. There just isn't. So automatically, this whole thing falls apart because it's not possible. So in that scenario, we put else. Else cout. Then we put the key, the thing that they entered, the space. And this is not in the array. Let me delete this right here. So yeah, that's basically it. Like, that's the reason why we put -1 here. Is so when we call it inside the main, remember, this whole thing right here is going to be inside the main. This thing on top is the function itself. This is function. This is in the main. And it makes sense, right? Because what we're doing here is selecting a specific spot, and then when we select a specific spot, it's not going to display this array thing. It's going to display the number that's in that specific spot. So in this case, when we selected whatever we got from here, which in this case was what, slot 3, we're going to display what slot 3 has, which if this was right, it would display 4, and then it would equal to each other. Therefore, this cout statement would be correct. But since in the example that we were going in the route where if it's -1 and it goes inside here, it's not possible to get -1. So automatically this falls apart, like I was saying, and then we go into this one. And then, yeah, obviously it's going to say it's not in the array. So hopefully that clears things up. And yeah, that's it. That's basically how we could select in a sequence of inside the array, or whatever it's called formally. So yeah, that's it.